what the hell? And so I'm, hustling over to try and figure out how to break up a 5-dog fight.
Yeah.
And hit a little dip in the yard. Snap.
Did you hear it?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I think the dogs heard it, for God's sake.
Oh.
As soon as I hit the ground, those 2 dogs left those 3 and came right back to my side.
Really? That was actually very cool. That was amazing. They must have heard it.
I think they
They
did.
must have they sensed something.
They certainly sensed it. But
They're like,
yeah, as soon as it happened, they were right back by me. They were like, okay,
we're
mom's
protecting
down.
her. Amazing. That's
And
pretty cool.
so my husband was able to grab them and haul them back into the yard, and he would wrap my leg up in a bunch of moving blankets.
So that kind of break is like, yeah, that's a bad break because it's a twisting break where it kind of cracks differently.
How are you?
Did you have to have any pins? Or?
Got your email. Haven't had a chance to open the document and look at it.
2 surgeries.
Are you done with the surgeries?
Done with the surgeries, hopefully. Wait a little bit till it heals up to see how the ligaments are.
Yeah.
We stretched them out too far, and I have to do some work in a bit.
I'm still in favor of it, so.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. Shoot. Yeah, she's running at my dogs. I broke my leg.
I'm trying to.
But everybody's got one, right?
I'll do it. It'll be faster.
I can't read that.
I'm just glad they didn't have a dog fight also,
Yeah.
because that would have just been horrible.
You sit here and see your dogs.
I could just sit on it.
I know.
Watch it and you can't move.
I don't know if we'll get to it or not. You need it?
Okay. Not like bark, move, attack. Their dogs were way better than my dogs. My dogs were the instigators. Totally.
What kind of dogs do you
I
have?
have a German Shepherd and a Golden Retriever.
Oh, yeah, I had a little.
The Golden is, yeah, he's a total, like, he's a protector.
Yeah.
He's territorial.
Yeah. And my gold was like that. You got a male?
Yeah.
I had a male. I just put it down.
Why's that?
He was very suspect.
You're alone. We don't need you being
But
alone.
he was a spaz.
That's not
Just
good.
want to jump in your
Maybe we put you a little. Maybe put your little desk right here in the middle.
It's very protective, right?
How you doing? I am well. I feel bad. I feel like I should have sent you a note saying, "Why don't we cancel today's?" You know, I just got finished running everybody else out of the shop.
Right.
You know, I don't think today will take too long.
My gold was like that too.
So
Yeah, the backyard
Be a good
was
discussion.
like, it sounded like he was going to tear your head off if you walked in the back. You know, sometimes you didn't recognize me. I'd come in the back gate or something. I was like,
my youngest son is home.
buddy, it's me. It's me.
Up in Seattle.
Don't kill me. They're actually
Since we're
great
not being
dogs. They're great dogs.
My wife's parents showed up. So we're happy to have them.
Yeah.
Just couldn't do a lot of planning. So now we're shopping. Sure we have.
Oh,
Yes.
and ignore you.
Like, well, literally, I'll ask him, I'll tell him to sit, and he'll look at my husband.
Right, is it?
And he'll have to go.
Yeah.
And then the dog will
Tell Tracy this. The dog I had when we got married is my dog, and he was a part-time German Shepherd. And Tracy says, as long as I'm this way, his paycheck, well, that was your dog. She loved Harper,
It is that,
whatever
that
day,
is John's dog, and Jacob is mine.
Yeah. Yeah.
we had 2 labs for
You still have your gold, right? Oh, the yellow lab. Yeah, that's the one.
I've been waiting to do that, yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the December 21st, 2017 Transportation Advisory Committee meeting. Let's call this meeting to order. We do have a quorum. And let's start with introductions. Anton.
Anton Ramage, El Paso County.
Victoria Chavez, El Paso County.
Wade Burkholder, Manatee Springs.
Darren Horstmeyer, Schriever Air Force Base.
Rick Orphan, Fort Carson.
Wendy Pettit, CDOT Region 2 Planning.
Ken Prather, PPACG.
Ben Sheets, City of Woodland Park.
Brandy Williams, City of Fountain, and this is Savannah Bivens. She's been training with us over the winter time.
And you brought her here?
I did. I asked. I gave her all of the warning in the world. And it just wouldn't be the same. Since we're both
Glad to have you
dressed
here.
up for me to come by myself.
Aaron Busto, Federal Highway Administration.
Deborah Baumgartner, East Alpha.
And Brian Vitulli with the City of Colorado Springs Mountain Metro Transit.
And Brian, can I interrupt before you much further? Can you please make sure that your microphones are turned on? There's a little light there that looks kind of green if it's not on, but if you turn it on, it turns blue. We're having, a lot of times, the voices are not being picked up, so people listening in on the YouTube cannot hear what's being said.
All right, sounds good. Thank you. And Brandy, thanks for bringing the holiday cheer with you. Yeah. And in the audience, please.
Mark Andrew, North Program Engineer for CDOT.
Dave Water, resident engineer in our program with Mark.
Thank you. And staff? All right, thank you. Could I have a motion to approve the agenda for this month?
So move.
And a second? Second. All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you. Item 3, public comments for any items that are not on the agenda. All right, seeing none, thank you. Item 4, approval of the November TAC meeting minutes.
Move approval.
First, second. All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you. Item 5, Board of Directors report from the December board meeting. Ken?
The board approved TIP administrative change 9 that you were notified of via email. They did that under consent item. Under their action item, they interviewed 4 candidates for executive director, selected Andrew Gunning, he goes by Andy, who will start here February 20th. Andy's background real quickly, he was a city planner at City of Clemson, South Carolina, then principal planner for Pima County, Arizona, then the regional planning director at the Pima Association of Governments, then became the deputy director and acting director there. He's currently at, he was the deputy director at Pima, or director of planning, and then he went to the city of Rockville, as Maryland, as a deputy director, planning and development services, and then the acting director. So he will start here February 20th.
All right. Yeah, being here last week, that was quite an interesting board meeting, to have it be such a public process, and pretty much everybody who was there for the interview process, and yeah, it was very interesting, and well done to have it set up that way. And there was an open house the night before for a couple hours for stakeholders to come and meet all the candidates and eat some cheese and soft drinks and things. So it was a good effort. So I know there's a lot of people who are excited for this organization to kind of move forward. So it's been a long time. So great job. All right. Item 6A, our first action item. Development of project list for potential 2018 ballot questions. Mark.
Good afternoon, Mark Andrew with CDOT. I've got 3 handouts plus the PowerPoint. First handout is our ballot list of projects, and these are our current recommendations. I'll go through why.
Mark, did it change since our packet?
They may not have. No, this is the stack. This is what was presented at the stack. So I think it is the same list as your packet. So this may
Yes,
be.
the packet is the stack material.
Okay, so it's the same. And then you may have this one too as well, so I apologize for the duplication. I wasn't aware. And this is a letter from Herman Stockinger explaining the ballot program and where we're at with it. And then the third list I'm handing out is a list of projects that I put together for the Senate Bill 267 and also for the 1243 list. Really what this is a list of projects that are in your 2040 plan that are not on the current ballot list. They could be on the what we call our 10-year capital list, Tier 2, but they were not on the Tier 1, nor are they on this current ballot list. So just as important is to know what's on the list, what isn't on the list. And I think that's what I want the boards to be aware of. And again, today I'm asking for your consideration, but at the same time, we're not asking for an adoption of this list, just recommendations or comments. So let me go through a PowerPoint presentation here and kind of explain where we're at in this process. To kind of bring everybody back to where we were with the 1243 list, what we wanted to look at when we developed this list and our 10-year capital list is what are PPACG's priorities, and what we've at CDOT have kind of broken down what we consider the higher priority corridors versus the other corridors, and there can be some conversation about what's considered high and low priorities, but generally our higher priority corridors are corridors that carry the most traffic and have the most safety needs. So I-25, Fountain to Northgate, Powers Boulevard, both north and central. When I say north, it's really Woodman North, and central would be the center part of Powers. 24 east of I-25 and 24 west of I-25 as our two US 24 corridors. And then the other corridors that we want to consider, 94, 83, 85, and 105 and 115, not in particular that order, but those are the other important corridors that are in the 2040 plan. So to back up, our Senate Bill 267, to give you an idea of where that came from, we do have that approved for $1.8 billion. And essentially the funding is based on lease purchasing of state buildings. 100 million of that is coming from lease purchases, and then CDOT has to kick in another 50 million annually. So what we're putting in the mix is about 150 million, and bonding that over 20 years gives us about $1.8 billion. So we're going to have proceeds over the next 4 years in projects, and we'll talk about what those projects are. The commitment is 25% to rural counties and 10% to transit. And right now we've got 250 million of that money dedicated to go to the GAP project. So the potential ballot measure really, again, is we are creating a high priority project list for consideration. We are not sponsoring the measure. My understanding, it's Denver Chamber of Commerce and our Colorado Contractors Association that are sponsoring this ballot measure. It is going to be a $6 billion list, but it also includes the 267 list. So the 267 list is 1.8. We're going to combine that with a $4.2 billion list for a total of 6. That $4.2 billion, we're looking at needing an additional $300 million of revenue over 20 years to raise that $4.2 billion. The size and type of funding is still uncertain at this point. So, again, CDOT is not sponsoring it. We've been simply asked to provide a list of priority projects to be able to fund, to be able to meet that $6 billion list. I want to take you back, and I want to reference the handout, which is the 11 by 17. And we'll be going through this. The first project, I think it's on the second page, is your first Pikes Peak project. It's project ID 19. And so the description on the list may change a little bit, but essentially that scope goes from Fountain all the way to Northgate. And what we're looking at right now with that segment is about $436 million worth of improvements. What we want to do is widen from Fountain all the way up to Circle Lake interchange. That's exit 128 to, I believe it's 136 or 137. And that would go from 4 to 6 lanes. And then we're also looking at, and this is new to this ballot list that we did not have on the Tier 1 list last time. It was a Tier 2 project, but we felt compelled to bring this forward to this higher priority list, and that's widened from 6 lanes to 8 lanes through Colorado Springs from Circle to Briargate.
So Mark, I may be missing it, but this says 132.
It does say 132. It should be
It should be 128.
Right. It should be 128. So, so that list has been revised since you've seen it, and some of our comments didn't get implemented on that. So, but we've told headquarters that we are looking as far as Fountain to widen and north. We also, in that scope, want to improve the auxiliary lanes from Garden of the Gods to Fillmore, or implement those lanes because they don't exist. And then we, as a companion project to a developer-driven project, we may be adding some money to widen the shoulders up at Powers and Northgate, and then also address some bridge widening at the Northgate bridges. So that may be around $15 million that we may add to the mix. The developer's not on the hook for doing those improvements, so we want to potentially add to that project. And then we are also looking at additional ramp metering through town. We do have a ramp metering project that's funded. If there's additional ramp metering, we may add this to this project. But right now, we're hoping, and the description does include ramp metering, we're hoping that we can pull that out of the scope if we can fund that independently. And then the ramp metering would be certainly something in addition to the widening project that we would do as an interim project. And right now, again, we have a ramp metering project that's around $3.5 million that is scheduled to go out to add this spring. And we're looking at 10 locations to do ramp metering. So again, it's probably going to be an independent project. So all of these improvements were included in the 2005 EA and FONSI. The only exception would be we have to look at the improvements from State Highway, actually not State Highway 16, it would be Academy down to Fountain. Those improvements were not included in the EA. They were studied, but they were not part of the proposed action. So we have to go back and look at that EA document, either amend it or do a separate document for that project. But the good news is all of these improvements is listed should complete all remaining projects in the EA, which is good news. So the next corridor we're looking at is 24 West, and it is divide to I-25. Currently, we have some safety projects that we're putting out this spring at 21st, 31st, and Ridge Road. We did 8th Street with some improvements as part of the Cimarron project. And then we do have ST, which would be surface treatment from 8th Street up to Chipeta Park Road. Those two projects are slated to go out in the next 10 years. So those are currently funded projects. What we don't have funded is additional scope to improve intersections and additional safety projects that we want to do on the corridor, and those are yet to be defined. What we're saying right now is we're going to cap it at $25 million. We've got a $270 million list of projects that we could potentially do, but because of the limited funding with this program, we just can't afford to do all 270 million. So we're looking at trying to come up with a good fit for that 25 million and look from Divide to I-25. That could include improvements at Cascade. It could include additional improvements at 8th Street. It could include improvements between Divide and Woodland Park, including improvements in Woodland Park. So as we develop this program, we're going to get some help from our staff and consultants to try to prioritize a set of safety projects for that 25 million. Any questions?
Yes, I do. Your Ridge Road project, what does that entail?
So we're making Ridge Road a three-quarter movement where we're restricting movements from Ridge Road to turn left onto US 24. It'll be a restricted three-quarter movement. So, there is a concern about moving pedestrians and bicyclists across there, and so what we'd like to discuss further with the city is maybe coming up with a pedestrian crossing there, a pedestrian bridge. That's not funded in this program, but that's ultimately a solution that we need to look at, or a need that we need to look at. Okay. The other corridor is US 24 East, powers to Rama, and currently that's under a study, planning environmental linkage study. And what we will do is break out a series of projects to be funded with that PEL and do separate environmental actions on those. The first priority we're looking at and to be included in this is project ID 22, and that's widened from 2 lanes to 4 to 6 lanes from Garrett to Stapleton Road. Again, this is on in your 2040 plan as a priority, and so we think this is the next priority project on US 24 at a cost of around $64 million. It's not a cap project. We think that we can certainly do it for $24 million, but that's going to take some time. We're going to have to buy some right-of-way and finish the environmental document for that work. Okay, the next project, Powers Boulevard. Let me just say on Powers Boulevard, we have about $1.1 billion worth of need on Powers in terms of cleared documents. The only project that we're recommending to move forward on this ballot list is research. We have looked at Constitution and North Carefree. That project is going to be $110 to $120 million. We think that rather than fund that project, we should consider widening I-25 through Colorado Springs first as a priority over Constitution, North and South Carefree. So what we did is, because we are limited in terms of the dollar amounts, we are proposing that. Now, there's been a lot of discussion which is more important, Powers or I-25. They're both important. We think that we're going to get to an issue with major congestion on I-25 before we get there on Powers. But with that said, they're both well needed. We're on both. We're on both. So I guess that's the bad news. The good news, we'll be able to fund some of these projects. The bad news is, how do you fund Powers Boulevard? Now, with the transportation bill that could be coming out, that's an option. Any future revenue, we need to start talking about how we do fund Powers, because it's in the next 10 to 15 years is going to become very congested. Right now it's still operating at a decent level, except Constitution is starting to be very congested. So, but we're still evaluating that as far as I-25 versus Powers. I think the only issue is if we were to put money on Carefree and Constitution that doesn't solve the congestion on Powers. It solves it at one location. It just moves the congestion down the road. So to really look at improving Powers Boulevard, we need to have a bigger revenue source to address building the freeway. All right. So another project that is not in PPACG, but I want the board to be aware of, is Project 100, and we're adding 100A to the Central Front Range list. The first scope would be to construct a new bridge at Rock Creek and widen from 2 lanes to 4 lanes between milepost 37 and 38. So there's about a 2-mile section, 1.5-mile section, where we go from 4 lanes back to 2, back to 4, just south of Gate 6. This is a project that we've been wanting to design and finish as part of that corridor for many years. So this is a good project for Central Front Range. And in addition to that, we are starting to see some severe deterioration on 115. And our asset management program simply doesn't have the money to address that deterioration. We're getting a lot of truck traffic on that road. What we'd like to do is reconstruct a portion of that road for about 10 miles and further, if we could, in full depth concrete. So we're adding that to the list for Central Front Range. Those two projects are estimated around $40 million. About $15 million for the widening and the bridge, and then another $25 for the pavement reconstruction. And then, of course, the GAP project that most of you are familiar with is on the list. However, it's on a Region 1 list. The project ID is not PPACG, but there's a portion within PPACG that's not shown here on the list. So the details on that, we're estimating the project to be about $350 million, $25 million from El Paso County, $10 million from Douglas County, $250 million from Senate Bill 267, and if we're successful with the infra grant that El Paso County put in for another 65, we'll be able to make up that $350 million. Our schedule is to complete the EA this spring. We'll finish up the design, and we're going into construction at the end of this year. We're going to use a project delivery method called CMGC. It's construction contractor managed general contractor.
Construction management general contractor.
Yeah, I said it right. Construction management general contractor. So it really involves getting the contractor on board early and helping you develop that package. And at the end of that process, the contractor bids on that project. If you don't like the bid, you can go out and solicit bids independently of that. So it's a streamlined process. It's an innovative way to get it done early and to get a contractor on board to help you through that process. So it'll be a 2-year project. John Hall, who is in my program, will be the director of that project, working under Kerry DiGiacomo, and Kerry is the South Program engineer for Region 1. And so they've developed a team, and we're going to be closely involved with that project as it develops. Regarding finishing the environmental document, they are looking at 3 alternatives. They're looking at adding a general purpose lane. They're looking at adding an express lane with tolling, and then they're looking at a no-build alternative as well. So more to come on that. It's still being developed, and I know there's been a lot of controversy and discussion about tolling, but again, the team is looking at that general purpose lane to say, we want to consider that too. We're not so locked into the tolling option yet. All right.
Mark, can I ask a question about that? So most of this project is in Douglas County, right?
Correct.
I mean, there's only a small portion
About 2
from
miles in.
Monument to county line. So why is Douglas County only contributing 10 million?
I can't answer that,
Yeah.
right?
I mean,
No, I
you
can't
shouldn't
answer
answer
that.
that.
I can't answer that. I don't know if a lot of people can.
Yeah, okay.
So, but I would say that what I've heard is Douglas County is providing additional improvements that are offline, that are going to support the project. Interchange, they're not going to build interchanges, but additional frontage road access and things like that, they're providing some in-kind
Okay.
projects. I don't know what those are, but that's what I've heard. So I don't know if it's in what the equal amount is, but
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
so,
Okay.
do you know, Tim?
Because the Dr. Cog and the Northern Ink, it's not as much of a priority for them as it is.
Right, right.
Let's just put it that way.
They probably have more traffic going from Castle Rock north on I-25 than they do from Castle Rock going south.
Yes.
So with that, any questions, and I know I threw a lot at you, especially with the list. Before we do that, let's take a look at projects that are not on the ballot list, just so you know. So I'm looking at the 2-page handout. So the first project we talked about is Woodman 83 in your long-range plan. It shows to widen from 4 to 6 lanes for 12 million. We don't think that should be on the list simply because if we build an interchange at Research, we can put off that widening for a few more years. I don't know how many, but essentially we solve a lot of the congestion problems by building Research. We'll have a 4-lane freeway from Woodman up to 83. The rest of the powers I talked about, there's $900 billion of improvements that are needed on powers that is not going to be on this list. And again, we're looking at what the consequences of that would be. We're looking at studying the delay and the delay costs in terms of economic impact if we don't do Powers Boulevard. But looking at it compared to I-25, again, we think that I-25 is going to be the bigger priority.
So who's doing the study? Are you
Our traffic unit's looking at that.
okay, so it's internal.
It's internal. The other priority is Airport Stewart Interchange. Again, it's part of the Powers Freeway, but it was broken out on your 2040 plan. That's not on the list. And again, with the improvements that we've made at Airport and Stewart, with the widening of Powers, we're not seeing the congestion there like we did in the past. State Highway 85, Comanche Road to Mesa Ridge, or Mesa Road, widened from 2 lanes to 4 lanes. We'd like to get that project done. It did not make the Tier 1 or Tier 2 capital list simply because the dollar amount was too small. So there may be other options to fund that independent of this list. So maybe there's Future Faster Safety or RPP that we can address that project. The 94 corridor study is on your list for $1 million. We are looking at using some internal funds to kick off a study for 94 for around $100,000 to $200,000 traffic study to look at those needs, and then we may go take those recommendations into a PEL. So we may be able to fund that independent of this ballot measure. And again, that project's too small, and because it's a study, it's not going to make the cut because it's not capitalized construction. Anything that's not capitalized construction is not going to be on the list. US 24 East from Powers to Mark Scheffel, widened from 4 to 6 lanes. That's on your list as well. The priority, we think, is from Garrett to Stapleton to get that from 2 lanes to 4 lanes, and then follow this project in the future to address that need. 24 at Ridge Road, again, as a broken out project, but it's combined with the overall $270 million worth of need on 24 West. But we also think that we can fund the safety improvement and then provide that pedestrian overpass and essentially address most of the scope that the overpass would give us. Not to say that we don't need the overpass someday, but we may be able to push that need off. At 8th Street, the $60 million interchange that was on your priority list, we want to look at an at-grade solution to see if we can do more improvements like we did the 1/4 CFI, maybe expand that to a full CFI potentially. That's going to involve right-of-way, but again, could be part of the $25 million cap for 24 West, but we'll look at 8th Street.
Can we move La Casita again?
We don't want to move anybody, but eventually, yes. I mean, to get the capacity that we need at that interchange, we're going to have to purchase some right away and relocate some businesses. Woodland Park bypass study, again, it's a study. It's not on the list. There may be opportunities in the future we can find funding to should the board make that a priority, we can maybe look at RPP funding. The 83 project, or 83 corridor, now there was a request to consider widening on 83 north of Powers. We are doing improvements, including roundabout at County Line, and just south of County Line, we're looking at passing lanes. So we have 2 projects that we think we can address some of the safety needs. It's not going to widen the road, but it's going to address some of the concerns that the public has had about 83. 24 West 8th Street to Manitou is that over-encompassing EA project for $270 million. Again, we've got $25 million to work with, and we're not going to be able to do the majority of those needs identified in the EA. And then the last one on the list we talked about is the Powers Extension 83 to I-25. It is not on the list. It was in the 24 plan, unfunded as a priority, but we're hoping that there's a combination of development funds and maybe a future PPRTA project that might be able to address some of the needs on Powers. I know it's on the B list right now for $31 million. That's not real money, but we are hopeful that the Northgate development can be successful in delivering their first phase to build the interchange at I-25 and make the connection to Voyager Parkway. And then it followed by that in the future would be to extend it all the way to 83 with private funds or the sales tax that's being generated with the urban renewal district up there. So bottom line is it's not on the list. It has not been a priority for PPACG in the past. So that's what's not on the list. So with that, any questions, any comments?
Any questions for Mark?
Yes, I do. So, and maybe this isn't related directly, but at some point, you know, you're looking at all the, like, I-25, all the mainline auxiliary lanes, the congestion there, but take Woodman Interchange, for example. It's backing up, and operations are backing up, seriously affecting the city streets. I think South Academy is an issue with the county. Is CDOT looking at anything to address non-main lines, but the interchange operations also?
We will at South Academy now. I don't know if we've really looked at Woodman or considering Woodman other than widening to 8 lanes through there. I think that will help, but your congestion as far as the operations through the intersections, there is no plan in the environmental document to address that. So not to say that that's not something we need to look at in the future, but right now we don't have that in the scope.
Maybe at some point we could talk separate
Right.
here. discuss solutions.
So I drive that
things like that.
about 2 to 3 times a week, so I see it myself, and it's that westbound to southbound movement that's
It's about to get worse.
it's backing up,
As soon as Woodman's done with the widening.
right?
Yeah, so
Build it, they will
we've kind of
come.
been looking at things that I think would be worth discussing with you all.
Sounds good.
Mark, I have a question. I know it's covered in the PowerPoint presentation that was in the packet, but how is transit being handled in this process? Could you just speak on that, please?
So one of the things, well, 267, if you look at the $6 billion list and include the $1.8 billion in that list, 10% of that $1.8 billion is going to transit. The other thing we are looking at, and I did not mention this, of the overall $4.2 million that could go on the ballot, we are looking at withholding anywhere from $500 million to $1 billion for statewide programs. So we may come back to you with a different list with reduced scope. For example, I-25, if we have to reduce the scope, to go to statewide programs like transit, to go to other programs like our surface treatment program that we've had to fund $15 million out of our surface treatment program to fund 267. So we've taken some hits in our asset management program and the transit program itself. We want to look at that too to see if that's part of that statewide program that we want to fund with the ballot measure. So more to come on that. That's still being discussed. In fact, I think it's being discussed this week at our commission meetings and what that looks like.
Okay. And I think, well, our old friend Michael Snow, who's now with Division of Transit and Rail, is reaching out to some of the transit providers, and there's a separate development program list being put together. I think HDR is handling that, so it just seems to be a lot of moving pieces and a lot still to come. So
Right. I mean, we still have additional park and ride needs that should be CDOT funded. The Woodman Park and Ride is not, the construction of that's not funded, nor is the expansion of the Nevada Tejon Park and Ride.
okay.
And so there's, which is not included on this ballot list, that we need to look at transit dollars to fund something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks. Tim.
Not really a question, just generally when I was looking through the list of local projects versus what Denver's pursuing, it's so disheartening. You know, you look at all the projects in their region, and if this is what's going to the ballot, you know, ours is such a small piece. It's frustrating, to be honest.
Yeah, if you look at percentages, what we're trying to look at is the RPP percentages that we're currently using. We're trying to get as close to those RPP percentages as we can. There's no guarantee, but right now, I think PPACG is pretty close in terms of the number of projects we've got. And then when you throw in the GAP project on top of that, we're probably above our RPP percentages that we get normally. So $436 million for I-25 that's pretty good compared to that's 10% of that $4.2 billion, which is pretty good. So
If we kept that in our region,
right.
you know, and we let the road fail, the interstate fail, and leave that in another region's responsibility to address. I mean, that's a lot more money that we could do within our region. Just venting.
And there's going to be more questions like that. And what they want to do is break it out by county and planning region and say, hey, they've already looked at the percentage in terms of sales tax contribution. Should it be a sales tax measure? And there's some numbers there that suggest that the El Paso County area is putting in, they're getting more than what they're putting in. But
Again, considering the gap.
right, considering the gap, and then also considering all of southern Colorado too. Region 2 as a whole, I think we're benefiting more than the tax dollars you're generating, according to some of the numbers that are listed in the packet that you have. So that some more discussion on that. So, all right.
Victoria?
So a question, and Kim, maybe you can help this. Mark, we appreciate you coming here today and the efforts that CDOT has done to kind of get the word out about what's going on. Is there an opportunity to get this before the board, before the
Going to the board.
January date?
It's going to the board, the next board meeting in January.
Excellent. Because I think the draft project list is due they're going to adopt it the 17th and 18th, is what we see in the letter. January.
Right.
So,
Whatever date that is.
I want to say it's the 10th off the top of my head, but.
It's the 8th or the 10th or something
Okay.
like that.
It'll be before that.
That's the first board meeting.
So things are moving very quickly, and again, that's our goal, is to get it in front of the board and get their comments and thoughts. So are we going in the right direction?
okay. Thank you.
Okay.
We don't know if it's a sales tax or a gas tax yet? Is that correct?
This scenario is based on a sales tax.
Okay, and would the sales tax funding then go into the HUTF?
Well, it would go to CDOT, and we would be able to bond that $300 million over those 4 years of. So yes.
So yes, it would go to HUTF?
Well, I don't know if it goes to HUTF, but
In
it
the
would go.
the last go-around, when we were looking at a ballot initiative, we were looking at putting that funding into the HUTF, which would then take 40% of it and give it to locals. So we would have seen our local revenue increase a little bit. Is that a consideration in this?
don't
or is
think-
this all CDOT?
This is all CDOT.
And no benefit then to locals?
Right. There's no pass-through.
There's no benefit.
Right. Now, I don't know what the TC is discussing today. I know we're looking at statewide programs that are underfunded, but I don't think they're considering pass-through as an addition to that.
Yeah, because we recognize you
Yeah.
need the money.
Right.
Absolutely, we need it too. And do we know how long this is going to last? Is it a forever sales tax, or is there a limit to it?
I understand 20 years right now.
20 years.
So I don't know if it was a half cent or what the scenario is. It's in your packet.
I didn't see that
For-
in the packet, did
It's
I
not in
miss
the
it?
packet.
It's a half cent they're looking at?
I think it was a half cent or higher. It's between a half cent and 1 cent sales tax.
Okay. And I guess looking at the list and looking at the revenue projections, I mean, it looks clear that we pretty much aren't going to be able to fund everything on this list.
That's right.
likely. So I guess just my 2 cents on it would be that I probably wouldn't have statewide pots if we can't fund this list. So, I get the need to have that statewide pot, but we shouldn't really put out a list of projects to voters that we know we can't deliver on. And if getting rid of that pot would help us deliver on more projects, that's probably a better place for it if we're going to go and ask the citizens to pay for it. Just our experience with PPRTA is similar to that.
Yeah, it seems like things are given the thumbs up better if they're defined for specific projects and not a broad category, yeah.
Right. So that's going to be taken under consideration. Does the public trust us to take a certain portion off the top for the asset management programs, and where do they see that money come back into their community, and is it right? And so part of that would be probably along the lines of our asset management program percentages, so that could be defined in the ballot, what that would look like. But still, I mean, like, for example, our geohazards, we may never see it. We may have rockfall needs on I-70 that are going to trump our needs here. So it's all going to be based on statewide priority. Surface treatment, on the other hand, that's a pretty even mix between the needs across the state. So we do get a percentage of that typically. That changes once in a while, but generally based on region. And so most of the money would be equitably distributed based on historic distribution.
Yeah, but you're basically overselling the list, knowing that we have to take it out. And the Pikes Peak area with Senate Bill, 225, is that it? 225? What is it?
227.
No, the one that we never got
Oh.
Senate Bill 1, wasn't it?
Right, Senate
Yeah,
Bill
that our region didn't bear so well the last time we had too big of a list and too little funding. So again, I'd really like to encourage us to take a list to the voters that we can actually fund so that we don't have that Senate Bill 1 issue again where we're not even getting what we were told we were going to get.
Yeah. And again, we're not sponsoring the ballot measure. Can't really speak to that, but my understanding is there will be a list for the voters. So there'll be a commitment to build those projects with that funding.
I think the other lesson we've learned locally is the impact of inflation. Once the demand on the concrete and everything we need, the costs just went up.
Right, and so what we've done, and you'll see in the PowerPoint, I listed P70. What that means is we looked at the cost today, and then we determined if we were to get money a year from now, when could we deliver that project? So we have schedules. And then what we did is we targeted a midpoint of construction and then an escalation factor of 3% per year based on those costs. So we do have escalation costs in there to determine that midpoint construction cost.
Good.
So I personally think they're too high, but we'll see. I mean, as we refine the cost estimates and the scopes better, we may get more.
I think that's right in line with what we experienced, to
Right.
be honest.
So we're taking a look at all these projects. Our project management office is putting them through a program called Crystal Ball that really looks at the likelihood of what the cost would be at a certain point. And so they're looking at unit prices and how they would fluctuate. And so the good thing is I think we're looking at that on a statewide basis, a consistent basis of cost estimating.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mark, this is an action item. Are you looking for a recommendation from TAC to the board, or the comments that kind of have been raised here? And
I have both comments and recommendations. We're not asking you to adopt the list today, but if you have any comments or recommendations, and Wendy may be able to add to that. My understanding is the list may change, so we're not asking for an endorsement today of the list.
so the comments that you've kind of received so far, that's sufficient? And then
That's-
you're going to come back to the board, right?
Correct.
And CAC next week?
Right.
And just maybe a general head nod of the way this is moving, if it's moving in the right direction or not, or,
Right.
very informal
So
head nod poll. Or not.
I won't be here next week. Dave will present, and then Rob Fry, our environmental manager, will be here as well to answer any questions you have.
I got then one more related question, since I'm unfamiliar with the political process. Is CDOT involved in the development of the ballot issue in terms of what you'd like to see, how it benefit you, or are you kind of keeping a hands-off approach, or what's the normal process for this kind of a thing?
I've been told we are not involved, but what we've been asked is give us a list of projects that you could fund with $4.2 billion plus your $1.8 billion consideration of those projects as well. So my understanding is that's all we've been involved with.
Thank you.
Brian, maybe you could help us be sure that the board hears some of our comments around in your report.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Mark?
Bethany, do you have a good handle on all those comments? Okay, thank you.
The recording is working, hopefully.
All right. All right, thank you, everyone. Item 6B, election of officers for 2018. Ken?
We need to elect a chair, first and second vice chair for 2018. Every member the voting member is approved or is eligible to, for any of those positions, including those in current positions. I will say also, I think it's fair, City of, or Town of Palmer Lake has submitted a request for Jason Dosh to be their primary representative. The board would approve that in January, prior to our next meeting, so maybe theoretically, since he's not here to defend himself, and he's never been here before, he could be nominated and voted in, and he wouldn't take office until the next meeting. But so it's kind of how you want to do it. I think I think I said in here what the bylaws require or ask for, but we have always done it in the past that I can remember as nominations from the floor.
Do we have term limits for the chair?
2 terms in a row.
And where are we at? Are we at our first term?
Everybody's at their first term.
Everybody is?
Everybody.
Ooh, can I make it easy?
Yes, please.
I move the the chairman, the first, and the second all remain as designated.
All right, any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you all
Congratulations,
very much.
Brian.
Congratulations to you, Brandy. Thank you. All right, item 6C, fiscal year 2017 to 2022, tip amendment number 15.
Want to go back to your tip amendment? See?
That's where we are.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were looking at the next one.
Tip amendment 6C. Tip
Sorry.
amendment 15. Yep.
Tip Amendment 15 is the addition of a rockfall mitigation project on Highway 24 on the west side of town. There's a pretty complete description of what they're doing and locations of where they'll be doing it. So, unless, Wendy, you've got any more knowledge on it, I know what's in the memo.
So moved.
Is there a second? Okay, any other discussion?
Just as a point of clarification, we had to do this as a tip amendment, even though it's state-only money, because it was a scope change, but we had something much smaller originally planned, and they allotted us more funding, so it became a scope change. And even though it's state money, it would, with the scope change, we'd have to have a tip amendment to do that.
We appreciate you keeping the rocks from falling on our heads. So.
I agree with you totally.
And it wasn't too many years ago when there was a rock that did fall down. I think it went through the trailer. It didn't go through the cab of the truck. It
Yeah.
went through the trailer it was towing.
Yeah.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you. Okay, our first and only information item, fiscal year 2019 to 2022 TIP, call for projects submissions. Ken?
Okay, we had 14 applications that were submitted, and they were identified in your memo. I hope that was kind of clear, or broke it up, each project that was requesting funds, so there was should be one page, for CMAQ projects, and there's one page for Metro, or 2, one for TAP, and then there were 2 projects submitted using CDOT funds, CDOT operations, and CDOT RPP. And then the other thing that happened after the call for projects was initiated is that we decided to use FY 2018 funds that were available for cost overruns rather than for the new tip. So that reduces the amount of funds available for the new tip. And starting then to look at some of the projects and starting to analyze them, there were 4 projects that are in the 2040 plan. Well, we identified that all of the projects are included in the fiscally constrained 2040 plan. There are 4 of them that are funded in the 2040 plan with RTA monies, no federal dollars. There are 2 that are in the plan that are funded with CMAQ that are now requesting TAP dollars. And having discussions with FHWA and CDOT, you know, in the past, we never worried about funding categories. It was the grand total. But the rules have been tightened and changed, and the emphasis on accountability and everything else, and the plan leading the tip has changed. And so right now, to fund any of those RTA projects or to fund the CMAQ projects with TAP money would require a 2040 plan amendment, because our funding categories would no longer be fiscally constrained. If you're taking private projects and funding them with federal dollars, there's no federal dollars in the plan available for those projects. So I haven't worked out all of the details yet. Let me just Okay, this is what was in the call for projects. This is the funding table. Can everybody read that? Is that big enough?
You could go a little bigger.
Yeah, please.
Well, it's not.
There on the bottom right, right?
Yep, bottom right.
I can't even see the.
Oh,
There it is.
a little too far down, yep.
Still up.
There you go, there.
Was that it?
Yeah.
You're on it now.
Now,
The other-
the
there you
other
go.
way.
Can you see that? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Lovely.
Yes, sir.
Okay. 2018 funds are gone, so the totals that are over there are different than what was in the call for project packets. But all it is the subtraction of the funds from 2018. There's no other change there. So to avoid getting into the issue of what we went through last time, where we added projects to the tip and then had to go to the plan, take projects out of the plan so we could put the tip projects into the plan. The idea that I'm thinking of, and we've talked over here with staff and with FHWA and CDOT, is that those funds that are requesting the RTA projects and the CMAQ projects that are requesting different federal funds that are in the plan, we would not fund this time in the tip. We would move ahead with the TAP projects and the Metro request that were in the plan asking for TAP project or for TAP funds, and for the Metro projects requesting Metro funds. And if we do that, there would be the 3 requests for Metro projects, which was Charter Oak Ranch Road and the 2 Fountain Creek Trail projects. I think no, Charter Oak Ranch Road, the Paso County Corridor Study, and the North Nevada Corridor Improvements Project. They were all Metro projects in the plan, requesting Metro dollars. There's enough money that they could be funded. The TAP situation is there will be 3 eligible projects. I'll put quotes around the word eligible. The 2 Fountain Creek Trail projects down in Fountain, and the American Discovery Trail up in Woodland Park. Now, they all total come to 1.6 million. There's only 800,000 available, depending on how we want to do some horse trading. You could fund 2 of those projects. There's 2 800,000 projects, and the Woodland Park project is like 52,000. So 2 could be funded, 3 could be funded, but the third one would be, no, you couldn't get the third one. You got 2 $800,000 projects. So we could fund one or the other. So that would have to be the competitive process, or some kind of what we just did for the cost overruns, where one entity was willing to cut back their request to allow the other entity to be funded entirely. The CMAQ, that was a 2 TAP projects. What's CMAQ is another one that was funded not with CMAQ funds in the plan. So what we're saying here, without amending the plan, we would not fund the CMAQ project at this time. Now, we're going to be doing another new tip in 2 years. So in essence, we're talking about fiscal years 2018 and 2019. The new tip would be starting in 2020 and moving on. All of the money that's not used in this call for projects would still be sitting there for the next tip.
If you do that, what's the number that's carrying over?
I haven't done that
Oh,
much
sorry.
detail yet.
Okay.
Do you have the 2040 list?
But there's still, well, it wipes out all the TAP money. CMAQ money wouldn't be touched until next time, so it's sitting there as is, with remember the caveat that we may not be eligible for CMAQ funds in 2020. So that's, no matter what happens, even if you program it now, it may not be.
We would lose it? If it
We would not be.
I was thinking we should throw some projects into it, but they would lose their funding anyway.
We've never gone through this before. I can't
we
answer definitely one way or another.
Any sense, Aaron?
Well, you would no longer be non-attainment or maintenance. So yeah, you wouldn't get any CMAQ money.
And even if the projects were already programmed and planned?
Right.
Bummer. Okay. Just checking,
Oh, yeah.
looking at all
That's why
options.
we left it in there.
I mean, because theoretically you could do that for the next 100 years. But yeah, once you're done, you're done.
Darn us being so good on
Now,
air quality.
the other option that, turn off your microphones, is, if we delay requesting being redesignated, we might still be eligible in 2020.
I didn't hear any of that.
Yeah, now you can turn your microphones back on. But anyway, we are the first in the state going through this process, to my knowledge, and we've initiated discussions with APCD, but don't have gotten any response from them. This is still, for them, a couple of years out and not very high on their priorities, but we are starting to look into it as to what is it going to take, because the SIP in Colorado, creating SIPs, amending SIPs, requires legislative approval. Now, if we were being simply redesignated with no more SIP, I'm not sure what that process is. Seems like it would not involve the legislature. We knock off 6 months right there. It just goes to the commission and to EPA and the Fed, FHWA, and I don't know. That's what we're trying to find out. And since nobody's gone through it before here, so we don't have a firm game plan yet. Anyway, so that money would still be on the table. The TAP money would be gone with the projects that we've got submitted at this time. Metro, I think it was your Charter Oak Ranch Road for $2.5 million. So
2.7 if you count the plan.
800,000, so El Paso County, so there's $1 million, $3.5 million. Subtract $3.5 million off of there. That'd be your remainder then for Metro for the next call for projects. Now, what we do with the $5,000 that's sitting in 2019, I don't know. We can wrap that up into an existing project that's in 2019, or when we do cost overruns in, if somebody really needs $5,000. But I could see that disappearing on existing projects.
And 2019 starts July 1st.
We can't roll it, can we, into 20?
We could.
And would that help get any other projects funded in 20?
Not 5,000.
Not with the 80, yeah, only 81, huh? Okay.
No. So that's kind of the concept I'm leaning on right now. The other comment I'll make is that all of the RTA projects, the city's planning study project, your corridor, major thoroughfare type project, they weren't scored because we didn't score the planning projects. We didn't have enough of them. So in the planning funding category we had, there was no competition. So we just saved ourselves some workload and didn't score it. Now, the RTA projects were privately funded, bringing their own money with them. There was no need to spend the time scoring them, as well as local projects or truly private projects, developer projects. So we didn't score any of those. So we would have to go back and score those projects if we were going to take the approach that we wanted to have the full competition and select projects and then go through the process of amending the 2040 plan to put them in and take projects out. It still has to be a zero-sum game with the plan by category.
So I understand your thought process and all that. So, and understand following, discussions with the FHWA and following the guidelines. One of our projects that you're talking about, though, is 30th Street. I would argue is in the 2040 list as a federal funded project. In fact, it's already programmed. It's an existing project that's programmed in the TIP.
Okay.
So, what we're looking at is an additional element to that existing corridor. And we did find a way to identify additional metro monies that would be applied to that one project. So I think we have a good case of 30th Street Roundabout being.
Well, like I say, I haven't gone through all of the details yet, but I remember that was all in your description.
Yes. So I understand Dublin was RT only, and not in the funded corridor, federally funded corridor or whatever. But our 30th Street project certainly is.
Okay. So whatever you were asking for then for that project,
$1 million.
okay, so we're asking right now for 3.5, that'd be 4.5 million. That wipes out Metro.
Yeah. It's
Or
actually
leaves
1.1 million.
300,000 in Metro, and at this point, again, it's less than what's available, so it would be non-competitive, and all four Metro requests would be on it.
Okay. I just would want to argue that. I think
yeah.
that one's,
And we'll make sure we look at that.
okay. Thank you.
So-
I'm okay with your approach. And I'm okay with
This
adding
is,
his too.
yeah, and this today is just
for
a
2
discussion,
cents.
so we'd come back next month with the recommendation, but it's kind of laid it out as to what it would probably most likely look like. We'd certainly be talking with you individually. And then to stay on schedule, since today was supposed to be a recommendation of projects, we will come with the full draft tip at the next meeting with a request for release to the public so that we can get it approved in April.
Ken, I have a question. The two TAP projects that I submitted, the route projects, bus stop improvement projects, you mentioned that they were not eligible, or you didn't include them as eligible projects, and why was that?
Because in the plan, those were CMAQ projects, and you're asking for TAP funds here. So whether it's a federal, green federal to blue federal, or local dollars to blue
Yeah.
federal.
Well, and the reason I asked for TAP is because,
We were applying for all of the CMAQ,
yeah,
which, I mean, if we were to, wait, why is our project not considered? Because it wasn't in the 2040 plan?
No, they're all in the plan, but for the
Our
wrong
CMAQ
funding
proposal?
category for the federal funds that are being requested.
So it has to be a net zero gain. So if you put something in, you have to take something out. So if you're asking for TAP money and we don't have a project, for instance, if we only have $100 of TAP money and we're asking for $150 of projects, then something has to give somewhere within that same color. So you have a project that either has to come out or to make it a net zero game. We have to be fiscally constrained by the color of money now, not by the total.
And that's, that is the change. In the past, we ignored the color of the federal money, and we played a real good shell game, and now we can't do that anymore.
Brian and Tim, would you consider changing his funding requests to CMAQ for those? Because you're not going to be able to get your CMAQ project anyway, right? So why don't, as a recommendation, why don't you change his projects to CMAQ, which is where they were funded, and they'd be eligible, and you could tie up that money recognizing that it may or may not
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah.
But I want to throw the option out there, see if everybody's okay with it.
There's a risk. Whatever project you put on that $1 million in 2020, it's a risk.
Well, there's a risk with any of it because we don't have a new federal bill either, so there's a risk with anything.
Right.
As we move forward.
But I sense
There's a greater risk here,
Yeah.
or a known risk.
Right.
As
I think
compared,
because we didn't know that we couldn't do what we always did, I think we should give Brian and the city the option to switch their funding requests.
All right. We'd appreciate that, thank you. And so remind me, why is the traffic signal advanced detection project not eligible under CMAQ?
because it's funded under TAP in the 2040 plan.
Oh,
All right, the advanced detection?
The CMAQ?
yeah.
Yeah.
It's under Metro and CMAQ.
Yeah, I don't, I'll double check, but I don't, it's not a CMAQ project.
There's like 3 funding categories or 2 categories it fits under.
Okay, I'll go back and double check that.
It's Metro and CMAQ, I'm sure.
So the most that he could apply for his project would be the amount for CMAQ? I mean, that would be the only,
In which case, if you want to do that,
Then
you two are competing for the funds, since you're the only one that requested them.
So here's what I see as maybe a fallacy or something that we might have slipped through the cracks. Is so the only other CMAQ projects, the only CMAQ project I saw in the 2040 list was the category we submitted, and Brian's transit projects. And if there's more money now being offered on the table than is in the 2040 plan.
Okay.
So what do you do when you have more, that funding category has more monies than what we have programmed?
Then,
So that's kind of where I think, when I was looking through seeing which projects were eligible and all that and looking for CMAQ projects, it was his and ours, and that was it.
okay,
So,
I'll go back and look at that.
So now I think we have more money available than what we reflect in the 2040 plan.
I don't even see your project in the 2040 plan.
So then
Look under
because-
citywide. Starts with a C.
I know which page number it's on. There's two citywide projects, Phase 1 and Phase 2.
Right, and those are our funded projects, actually. So we've tied up all that CMAQ money. And then you have Brian's CMAQ projects that were not tied
I've got
up.
a note that says that they're in a different category, but I will go back and double check,
Yeah.
make sure.
Or there was
that we're
some
clear.
other, there's another one, but it didn't come anywhere close to the amount that's
We'll
available.
look at it, but we'll be dealing with you, but that would be the approach to take, that we've got to stay fiscally constrained within the funding category.
Okay.
If it can be worked out between you two or between the tap, the two Fountain Creek and the Woodland Park, if we can work out an agreement,
So do our muscle, or we just?
we'll just, then we can come back. Then I can get with you offline, I can come back in the memo in 3 weeks and say, city has modified its request, Fountain has withdrawn one request, so the other project plus Woodland Park can be funded, and that leaves 50,000 in TAP in 2022. And that would be what would come out in the memo, but at least the individuals who are involved would be aware of that and approve it. So that kind of offline stuff can be done.
It's certainly my preference to try and use all the money we've got up there.
Be about half success.
And do you want me to address the
All right.
RPP?
Probably revise our.
You want to say something about
Sure,
that?
I think we should.
Okay.
So we had two projects that came in, they were asking for RPP money
And off.
and CEDA operations. The operations, I'd have to go back and talk to traffic about to see if that's a realistic expectation. It could be, I don't know. But these applications were not submitted by CDOT to my knowledge. And the one for the 67 improvements, there is no money left in the PPACG area till after 2022 because we funded Cimarron. So all of the money that was allocated to this area has been spent. Everything that's left in the RPP balances belongs to some other part of the region. So there's only one piece left. It's the piece for the I-25 project going south, the pavement project that Mark was talking about earlier. So there's like $400,000 left there. So if we want to give up I-25 but this is for $2 million, so this can't be done during this call for projects. This is a project that would have to be put forward with the next statewide process through our next long-range plan and next program distribution.
2 years, we could reconsider it.
Yeah. Actually, it won't even be that long because we'll be working on getting those projects in place in
Okay.
the next year or so, so it would be on the radar
So
for
in
this.
your process, we could reconsider it in a year.
Right.
We'll be doing a new tip in 2 years, and we'll be going beyond 2022.
And we'll be making a
tip.
tip amendment to add whatever we need to in the interim into the middle of that document as we move forward. But I will check with operations to see if this is a realistic expectation for the, and if you send me the rest of these applications, I will help you figure this out, make sure that we're all on the same page and that we're all going forward and going down the road together. Okay?
So I will get with you offline, I will get with Brian and Tim offline, I'll get with Brandy and Ben for Woodland Park.
You're going to be
Anybody else
busy.
I need to talk to offline? Okay.
Only if you cut one of my projects, then talk to me.
Huh?
Only if you're cutting one of my projects out that you've listed, then talk to me.
Well, the only thing is, if other projects were eligible, because I was incorrect when saying that they weren't eligible, then we're going to be back into a competitive process for Metro. And we said we would use the 2040 project scores. So as long as the projects were scored, that's going to be real
Well,
quick. But
what's-
if they weren't scored, then staff's going to have to score them.
To score them.
But that's, we're only going to be talking about one or two projects at that point, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there were top projects that scored already?
They were.
So you can let us
So
know
the-
what the
for-
scores are or were,
Right. But there's not enough money. There's only 806,000, and one project is 800, and the other one is 803, or something like that. Yeah. But you're only competing within the funding category, so your two.
That's all I'm worried about is
Yeah.
no problem finding $4,000. The county and I can work out the rest of the money then.
I don't see anybody else asking for the TAP money. I think we're just talking about the Metro and CMAQ, which is, if I got the right projects identified there, so we'll be working on that, and hopefully it'll be resolved, and in 3 weeks you'll get a memo that says, here's the draft tip, and it all is fiscally constrained, and everybody's happy.
It's been pretty smooth overall. Knock on wood.
Well, we're only
Just say that early.
Yeah,
jinx
why
that.
did I say that now? I should have said it.
we're only talking $5 million because we're not
Yeah.
adding in any new funding. This is all funding that somehow did not get programmed in the last tip for whatever reason. So
Yeah.
it's not a large amount of money.
Just have a couple quick questions. So Brandy and Victoria, what are the differences in your projects on the Fountain Creek Regional Trail? Are they just different segments?
I would say location.
Okay, all right, but it's completing sections that have not been developed yet or built, yeah, all right, that's great, that's great. And so, this is kind of the different topic, but somewhat similar to this item. Next week, the CAC is going to be addressing the cost overruns for 2018, right? So just a reminder to everybody who submitted for those, may want to be here for that meeting in case there are questions from the CAC members.
The recommendation that went to CAC, well, are we finished with this topic? Anybody else got any
Yes.
questions? Yeah, if you remember last month, the TAC recommended, well, we had the 2018 funds, and then at the meeting, Wendy identified additional funds in two categories because of project reconciliations, but they were in like $30,000 in one category and 15 or 25 or something in the other category. So we added that into the 2018 funds, and the city's Printers Parkway project, city reduced its request for federal funds for that, so that Monument's project could be fully funded for $150,000, and then you took the balance of that fund and said you would pay the shortfall out of your local funds.
That and a rescope, yes.
And so that's the recommendation that has gone to the CAC. They don't have all of that history and background there, but they are aware of the fact that, because I gave them the applications and the requests, so if they can see what was requested, then because of the city's generosity, reducing your request, fully funding Monument. And hopefully it won't be too confusing for them. They will have the CDOT presentation first.
Yeah, it was.
Don't know if that'll help them or not. But that's their two priority things next week, in addition to the tip memo. And so the cost overruns would go to the board in January for approval.
What's staff's opinion on that? What is staff's opinion on?
Support that.
Okay.
Good. All right, anything else on this item? All right. Item number 8, member entity announcements. Is there anything that anybody would like to share?
For folks that might be going in the north-south direction at USAPA, starting around mid-January and for about another year and a half, we're working on our last major bridge, and so it will affect traffic coming in through the south gate, trying to go up north. So just keep that in mind. You may have a little, I think D20 parents will probably be the most impacted by it coming from the south.
Okay. All right, thank you. Anything else?
My festive attire. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. See you all next year for this fun adventure that is the TAC meetings.
Same to you.
Same to
Thank
you, yeah.
All right, items for next month's TAC meeting. We'll have
New tip?
this- Yeah.
Recommendation for release to the public? My guess is there'll be a tip amendment, but not aware of one yet.
I don't think so. At least not for me.
Scoring criteria. We lost a month because I didn't get it done this time, so it'll be on next month's agenda.
That'll be an action item, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Okay, that's enough. It's plenty. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. We had a very great year, a very busy year, and thank you all for being involved, and happy holidays. We're adjourned.
Thank you.
Sweet.